Today's topic, create a budget with cash flow. Everyone's favorite buzzword, budget. So what we're going to do is walk through some tips today to create a budget, some ways to pay off debts, walk through good debt and bad debt. So we're going to go through a lot of the main topics we like to focus on when we're looking at a budget, but also just from an overall cash flow perspective and looking at the opportunities inside of cash flow. So that's all coming up next. Stay tuned. All right, first topic is actually creating a budget. It is not hard to create a budget. It's time consuming and no one really wants to look at how they're spending money. It's just one of those things that there's like a wall and people just don't want to run through the wall or climb over the wall. It's just a wall. So really what we say is, the first thing you have to do is rip off that Band-Aid. Lay out your spending, lay out your expenses. Usually some of it's very easy. We know the mortgage or the rent payment. We know student loans. We know our take-home number coming in from work because we're maxing out the employer plan and things like that. We know that we put X into the Roth IRA or the IRA. But the spending that usually catches up is the spending that's not that simple. The utilities, again, that's an easy one. But how much do we spend at Target? How much do we spend at Starbucks? And we're not anti-Starbucks, it's just that seems again to be another big buzzword out there. But just knowing what you spend is part one. And usually we say look at about a 3-month window, and we think of it this way. Know your take-home pay at the top, list out your expenses, make sure you're tracking those over 2 to 3 months is a good period of time. Right now when we're recording this video, it's towards the end of 2019. We know the holiday time is tough, but setting some boundaries and some guidelines there I think would be really helpful. So we'll obviously have details, much more details in the blog post, and we'll link that into the show notes for this video. But just keep that in mind that the first part and the hardest part is creating that budget. It's not hard, it's just time consuming and you have to be true with yourself. So step one is actually create the budget. All right, our next section is managing debt. And we really go through good debts and bad debts. So I'm actually going to flip from what the actual blog would be and just kind of talk through it from a video perspective here. Good debts, really no debt is good, but if we're going to label good debts, we're going to assume your mortgage is okay, your student loans are okay, possible business loans too, meaning that you're taking leverage for other opportunities. As long as they were calculated risk, we're happy with that. So we won't dig too much into good debt. Bad debt is the one that we want to focus on. Bad debt to us, for the most part, is credit cards without a doubt, personal loans, and then also even auto loans. For some reason, someone in the auto industry thought it was great to introduce 5- and 7-year car loans. That is not ideal. Most cars don't even last that long these days. So auto loans, again, it's kind of on its own little island. Whether you're leasing or buying, we come down to this number. If you can't afford to have the car paid off in 3 years, the car is probably out of your price range. Now, whether that's right or wrong from whatever perspective, that's how we look at it on the financial planning side. So I think that's your best takeaway from the car side of things. Now, there's 2 forms of debt repayment. So we call them essentially the debt avalanche and then the snowball. Snowball is the one that is really framed from Dave Ramsey. Whether you love him or hate him, it's a good strategy. It makes sense. Based on his following, a lot of people like the idea too. So Dave Ramsey's snowball is this. It almost ignores the math side of things, assuming interest rates, and says, hey, we're psychological beings and creatures, so what you're going to do is get your debt organized, and you're going to start with the smallest balance. So you have 3 credit cards, $5,000, $300, and $100. Start by paying off the $100. It just gets good mojo going, good motivation, and then go to the next one. So you're just essentially going to work with the smallest balance and keep putting that money to the next one. So once you pay off the 100, whatever you were paying towards that, pay that towards the next card. And then once the second card's paid off, put that towards the third card. That's Dave Ramsey's snowball method. The next is the avalanche method. The avalanche method is more mathematically correct because you're using interest rates. Simply put, get them all organized, cards with the highest interest rates, or whatever debt it is, whether it's a credit card or a personal loan, the loans with the highest rates, you're going to pay those off in order. So be more aggressive on the highest. Pay the minimums on the other. Make sure you're keeping everybody happy, but you're more aggressive on the higher interest rate loans. All right, and then the next section is going to be building your savings. So again, budgets part 1, getting bad debt out of the way is part 2. Part 3 is going to be start to save now. Now, it's not an all or nothing. You should be saving throughout, but once you get that debt paid off, now we want to focus on building up more savings. So make sure you're taking advantage of your employer plans, which we call qualified plans. Make sure you're taking advantage of an IRA or a Roth IRA. If you're high income, we call it a backdoor Roth IRA. If a taxable account makes sense, an individual taxable account or a joint account. Do you have kids, or 529 plans important? Make sure you're putting money towards the 529 plans. And even before all of this, or mixed in with all this, even just your goals. Is the emergency fund fully funded? That's pretty darn important. Make sure that emergency fund is funded. Any short-term goals, 1 to 3 years. Midterm, 3 to 7 years. Long-term, 10 plus. However you would break those down. Making sure that you're actually saving. And this is where we like to use the term top-down budgeting. So when you lay out your entire budget, tell your money where to go at the top of the budget. Okay, I'm going to put this towards my 401k plan. I'm going to put this towards my Roth IRA. I'm putting this into my son's 529 plan. Hey, we want to buy a vacation home in 5 years, so I got to put X away to do that. Walk through and tell your money where to go at the top of the budget. So then when it gets down to the bottom budget, you're already telling your money where to go from a goals perspective. So when you get down to the bottom part, this is where we say we don't care how many times you go to Starbucks. We don't care if you go to Chick-fil-A 4 times per week. That's okay, because we're already funding your goals at the top. But if we have to make changes to the top goals, then we'll make changes to the bottom goals as well from a budget perspective. So I think that top-down budgeting aspect makes life a lot easier. And then last but not least is just achieving overall financial wellness. So knowing how your cash flow actually flows, having your money organized, your debts are in good order, they're going to be paid off, you're starting to save for short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. That's what we consider financial wellness, and that's the overall goal of everyone, whether you're a client, a prospect, or an individual walking down the street. Overall financial wellness and whatever that means to you is vital, and building that foundation up. So those are just a few of the talking points we wanted to cover in this video for our blog post. Again, we will include the blog post in the show notes. As always, thanks for tuning in. If you ever have questions, please let us know, but we'll see you on the next video. And again, thanks for tuning in.